Hi, I'm Jürgen Rasmussen. I feel compelled today to make this video about free speech and the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. Just a few days ago, Charlie Kirk, a father, a husband of two, a political activist, was executed in cold blood while engaging young college students in open debate, discussing ideas. He was executed quite symbolically by one shot to the neck. I'm horrified by this. I'm gutted by this. I don't want to see this. I want to see way less political violence. And it's only natural for us to contemplate what can we do, both as individuals and collectively, to reduce the chances of political assassinations and more regular political violence happening. I can tell you one thing: it's not by censoring speech, it's not through hate speech laws. Quite the opposite. You see, I've been a therapist and a change artist for the last 28 years. I see clients every day who are fearful, who are anxious, who are raging, who are hypersensitive. Any therapist worth his or her salt, any therapist familiar with the psychological science on the topic, knows that trigger warnings don't work. It makes everything worse. It contributes, sheltering people in that way, contributes to people getting more fearful, more hypersensitive. It encourages them to see themselves as victims. And in case you haven't noticed, victims don't show much compassion. No one is less compassionate than a person with a strong victim identity. Victims are angry. They're rageful. They're so rageful that it becomes impossible for them to see the humanity in others, especially those whose beliefs differ from their own tribal beliefs. If you want to see less of this, what you want to do is to stand up for freedom of speech. We need a free speech culture. We need a culture where kids are raised to think in a principled way, so that they realize that if I want free speech for myself, if I want the right to speak my mind and to question ideas, then I have to grant that to everyone else. I have to grant that right, that freedom, to people whose views I may despise. My very own free speech rests upon that. We got to encourage young people to think in a principled way. But what we're getting now is a culture where so many people seem to think that they should be able to speak their mind, they and their tribe, those who think like them, but where they simultaneously feel entitled to never hear views that challenge their own sacred beliefs. How is that ever going to work? It isn't. That's why with the rise of woke identity politics and DEI and political correctness, you don't see more tolerance and a better capacity to think critically, regulate emotions, and to see the humanity in those who think in other ways. You see the exact opposite. You see more violence. You see more vindictiveness. We know that at a group level, the woke folks, those on the far left as a group, they score higher in neuroticism. They are more narcissistic. They are more Machiavellian. They have more dark triad or dark tetrad traits. You see, if people feel entitled to not hear views that challenges their own group tribe-based identities, they're going to get hypersensitive. They're going to get angry. They're going to get rageful. It encourages the victimhood, the very victimhood and rage that prevents them from seeing the humanity in those that think differently. With the right person, perhaps someone who's on certain psychiatric medications, this might culminate in an assassination. Most people will not assassinate or kill their political opponents, but they might not necessarily be that troubled by it either. Have you noticed among especially the far left these days how many people are celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk? Even amongst many more moderate folks, you see this. Yeah, I condemn the killing, but, he was kind of polarizing. He kind of had it coming. It's not the unison condemnation that says, look, in a civilized society, no one should be executed for their political beliefs. It doesn't matter the content of the beliefs, whether it's left, right, or anything else. But so many people can't quite do that. They're not that bothered by it. A lot of people these days are political authoritarians. They would like the state to censor the views of their political opponents so that only they and their tribe gets the chance to speak freely. What kind of culture does this contribute to? Again, a more fearful, distrustful, victimhood-based, rageful, and entitled type culture. What we're doing is that we're normalizing the very thinking styles that we often call cluster B personality disorders. We're breeding this stuff. We're encouraging it. On the other hand, if we take a stance for freedom of speech, if we encourage a freedom of speech culture, then we encourage young people to think in a principled way, where they realize that the only way for me to have free speech is if I give it to my political opponents as well. I can argue with them, I can try to persuade them, but I won't use the state to try to come after them. This encourages more cognitive flexibility. It encourages more resiliency. It encourages curiosity. And it encourages the very mindset that allows you to see the humanity in those who think differently. In that way, we can have more diversity and more tolerance in society. That is what's actually going to work. But for that to happen, we need to collectively grow up. We need to snap out of this whole woke, DEI, victim, oppressor, oppressed type mentality. It just doesn't work. So I hope that you will stand up for freedom of speech and that you'll encourage a free speech culture and do what you can to push back on hate speech, legislation, and that you will be able to see the humanity in everyone, irrespective of the content of their thinking. I hope this was useful. Thanks for listening.